Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Brady. Thanks for having me on today.
Good, man. So excited to have you. I think a lot of my audience is really familiar with Authority Hacker. If they're not, they should be. Like Authority Hacker is where I go to learn my information. So I'm super excited to have you on today. How did you get your start as an entrepreneur? Like, what's your story of kind of zero to hero?
Oh, that is a bit of a long story. So when I was 13, I started well, I wouldn't really call it a business, but I was selling Pokemon cards to like the local kids in my area. And I figured out that there was a kind of a supply and demand thing, right? Everyone had the English version, but they sold these Japanese versions, which had they were like two series ahead or something. So I went on eBay, got my mom's credit card, and I bought like a big booster box of these, imported them to the UK, where I'm from, opened them all up, and I started selling them individually to local kids. And because nobody there knew the real value of them, because no one had ever seen them before, they were trading me like Charizards and all sorts of stuff for these, common or semi-rare cards of the Japanese version. So that was really my first exposure to running a business. I didn't even know it was a business at the time. I just wanted to make some pocket money to buy, I don't know, sweets or something. But that was my first foray into business, really. Aside from that, I had a pretty average background. Went to high school, was told, "Hey, study hard, and you can get into a good college or university." So I did that. I was told at university, "Hey, study hard, work hard, and you can get a good job." So I did that. I got accepted to a sort of graduate program at a big finance company. And about 15 minutes after I started that job, I knew it was one of the worst decisions of my life. And I just felt the entire system had been set up to like defraud me and my future at that point. It was like, this is such a bad idea. I don't want to be here right now. Is this what life is? I was
If you
looking
don't
around
mind
at
me interrupting
people.
you, what was kind of the thing that set you off? Like, oh, there's a huge disconnect between what I want to do and what this is offering.
There was like an onboarding meeting where they told us what we were going to be doing for the next 2 years, and it was
Oh
like
gosh.
they're trying to sell us on the fact that we were going to get exposure to all these people, and like pre warning us of all the office politics, and saying how hard we're going to have to work, but it'll be worth it in the end, kind of thing. And it was in insurance as well, which it's not the most exciting field in the world, as I'm sure you can imagine. So my motivation to sort of learn about insurance and stuff wasn't really there. I was I liked sort of business. I liked project management. That was what I was hired to do. I liked computers, but insurance, it's kind of dry, dude. Honestly, it's not very interesting. So anyway, I was working there. Not much I could do at that point. And then over the first year and a half, it really just everything that happened then cemented into my mind the fact that I don't want to work in a big company. I don't want to work in something I don't care about or I don't have a passion for. I wanted to just figure out something else and move away from that. Deep down, I kind of knew I wanted to start my own business, but I had no idea what. I guess I was the entrepreneur without a business at that point in time. So I saved up a little bit of money. After a year and a half, I just quit because I couldn't take it anymore. And I went traveling. So I bought a one-way ticket to Southeast Asia, went traveling, did some scuba diving for a while, I did some courses there, thought about becoming a scuba diving instructor. But honestly, again, I was looking at people who have been doing that there in Koh Tao in Thailand for about 10 years, or who had been there for a long time. I think they were all kind of just looked tired. They drank too much. They were all heavy smokers. It wasn't a very nice long-term lifestyle. And I thought this isn't for me either. So I did a little bit more traveling, and then I ended up meeting Gail, who is my current co-founder, in a bar in Singapore, of all places. We became friends, and we were sort of hanging out for a while. Around about that time, I learned about something called Odesk, which is now Upwork, which is a platform where you can get freelance work online. I want to make a little bit of money, so I knew how to build websites. I knew how to do project management. I knew a little bit about online marketing and stuff just from doing some research in the past. So I managed to land a job with an American web design company, and I worked with them a little bit, but I was also learning there how to build websites, how affiliate marketing worked, how to do conversion optimization, A/B testing, really developing a lot of useful skills which would come back to be a benefit later. So as I was doing this, I think Gail and I were out for a beer one night in Malaysia, I think we were at the time. And we just got drunk and decided it'd be a good idea to start a business together. So we did. He was working in a SEO agency at the time, so he knew a bit about that. I knew obviously a bit about how to build websites for clients. So we combined that, launched a digital marketing agency, and then got our first client. It was a friend of Gail's a week later, and then just sort of grew from there. And over the next 4.5 years, we grew out a digital marketing agency. We had 30 something people working for us at one point. And then it was a long story, but we ended up selling that in 2014, 15. And during that time, we're transitioning towards authority sites. So like building our own websites, which is what I do now. So that's a kind of long-winded way of how I got into this.
That's awesome. So how long have you and Gail known each other when you said, hey, let's do this?
About a month. It's sometimes better that way, because I've tried to do stuff with like people I'd known for a long time before, and sometimes the existing relationship can actually be a negative factor. Of course, if you don't know someone very well, there's a big risk that they're crazy or you guys are not going to get on very well. But we complement each other quite well, so it seems to have worked. We're 10 years into this. Had multiple exits and multiple different businesses, and we're still together.
That's pretty amazing, really. I grew up in a semi-entrepreneurial family and heard a lot about like, oh, you should never get into partnerships. Like they're really bad and really dangerous. And I know you've thrived with it. A lot of people who do really well, like John Gillum is a mentor of mine, and that's all he does is pretty much partnerships. So who do you think a partnership is a good fit for, versus like you should for sure go in this alone?
So you have to be very willing to compromise first and foremost if you're in a partnership. If you are quite sort of hot-headed, or you can't have logical discussions under stress, then a partnership's probably not for you. You do lose a little bit of freedom in that you can't just decide something and do whatever you want every day in your business. Sometimes you'll have to, check in with someone else, or sometimes you'll make mistakes or they'll make mistakes, and, you both shoulder the responsibility. You're a team in that way. I think the type of people who get on very well in partnerships are those who have very strong skills or very strong mindsets in specific areas, and who can find someone who has complementary skills, but a different kind of mindset. So for example, I'm very logical. I like my SOPs, my processes, my systems. I'm very organized. Gail is not any of those things. He's like the mad scientist, and I'm the guy that like organizes it all. And so those two skill sets complement each other very well. He's very good at just coming up with new things, starting things, getting things going. And I'm very well at like growing them or scaling them or fixing them. So yeah, that's how it works, really.
Would you think it a fair comparison to compare like a partnership with like a relationship or a marriage?
Without the sex, for sure, yeah.
Okay.
I actually heard that quote like very early on when we started this business together, and yeah, it's very true. Like you have to actively also work on your relationship with your business partner, and inevitably when something goes wrong and you end up arguing and stuff happens, you have to both be able to like come back and like analyze what's going on, almost in like the third person, like, hey, why did we get into this argument about this stupid thing? Or like, what does the data show? What can we do next time? How could we improve it? And over time, we've had lots of those conversations. I remember there's one particular summer in Budapest when I was going to like too many parties and wasn't doing enough work, and like Gail got really mad and sat me down and all this stuff. And yeah, I was like, okay, I need to correct what I'm doing here. This is clearly like not working. So I did, and we fixed that issue. And this is one example of many things along the way. now that we've been doing it 10 years, those issues, I'd say, are happen very, very rarely. So we get on with most things. Like, I know what he's going to do often before he does it himself now. That's kind of like how long we've been working together and how well I know him. So
gotcha. So you think it gets easier with time?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Although there may be a bit of, what do you call it? Not selection bias, but
Survivor bias.
Survivorship bias.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where it gets easier with time, or you guys go your separate ways, So anyone that's been together in a business partnership 10 plus years, probably they're going to stay there for quite a bit longer, but
Interesting. I know we didn't plan to talk about this. So if you think this is off bounds, that's fine, and no worries. What advice would you give someone who is, say, in a business partnership, who is kind of having trouble connecting with their business partner, or say that they're on two different levels? So you have one person who is organizationally minded, so they're, say, an accountant, and another person who is sales minded. And they have different visions of where the company needs to go. What are some kind of conflict management tips you've learned, or like conflict resolution type stuff?
So in that specific problem, it's very hard to resolve differing visions. So you actually, the way to solve that problem is to have the same vision. What often happens is that if you never talk about what your vision is and where you want to go, as time goes on, while that may have started quite close to each other to begin with, as time goes on and you're each working in your own areas, you're not getting exposure to what the other person thinks or the direction the other person thinks it's going to go, because you're not communicating. And therefore, there's a bit of drift happening there. So what you need to do is come together, and ideally face to face, and so explain where you guys think you should take the business and why, and really kind of like have it out, like have that discussion as to why this is a good idea or why this is not. But you need to be very open-minded about what the other person is going to say, and the fact that they may have a better idea about where to take the business than you in certain areas. And then in that case, if their idea is logically better, you should compromise. So the more regular you have these discussions, the better. Gail and I have a quarterly planning meeting, so every 3 months, and that's perfect. That's enough for us. I mean, we even missed one in May because of coronavirus, and didn't really matter too much.
Are these in person?
Yes, always.
Okay.
Back when we were starting, we would have, weekly, daily meetings about the vision, as the business wasn't very mature and it was going in different directions, and all sorts of things were happening at the time. So yeah, honestly, you just need to talk to each other more about what you expect, and ultimately be prepared to walk away if you guys want very different things in terms of where you want to take the business. A common problem which I've seen in other businesses is someone's like, oh, I want to build $100 million company, and the other person's like, oh, I want to make $5,000 a month and travel and chill out. Both those things, absolutely fine. Both those things, achievable. But if you have one person that wants to do one thing, while a business partner that wants to do the other thing, that's a recipe for disaster, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, good advice there. And one thing you said really stuck out to me. So I have just finished my second reread of the book, How Google Works. Have you read it or heard about it?
I have not. No.
Oh man, amazing book. It's not about SEO at all. So it's written by Eric Schmidt and Jonathan Rosenberg, former CEO and Chief Product Officer of Google. And it's all about how they built this team, and really it's more about how to grow a company than it is. And it doesn't really talk about SEO at all, which is why I bought the book. I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to read this from the guys in charge of Google. But no, different from my expectations, but so much better. And one of the ways that they grew amazing teams and really built this amazing product at Google is they surrounded themselves with people who were able to look at data and look their boss in the eye and say, hey, you're wrong. And I think it was maybe Tyler Bishop, CMO of Zoic, who I was chatting with last week, who said one of the most critical things when it comes to decision making is getting your ego out of the way and being able to look at data and say, you know what, I was wrong about this.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree. Acute self-criticism, very, very important in business at all stages. The difficulty with the full data-driven approach when you're starting out is you don't really have that much data. It's not very good. and you can't really make much decisions on it. You know, if you have all the data that Google has in 20, whenever that was written, I presume it was many years after Google started, then it's much easier to make those kinds of decisions. Fortunately, more and more, especially with the types of businesses that we work with, online businesses, you have access to lots of data about your product, your customers, your website, you know, who's coming, who's buying, all those kinds of things. So you can make some good decisions on there. But I think it's a mistake to say, oh, I'm going to be full data driven when you're starting out. Those first few years of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of, it's like scientists in a way, when they have a hunch that something might work. So let's run an experiment and see. That initial hunch, that idea, that sort of like a part of your imagination that you think maybe we could build a product about this, or a website about this, or launch a service doing this, will sort of kickstart you, and then later on you can have that more scientific approach to see whether it's working or which part of it is working.
That's
so
interesting.
There's a bit of balance there.
Yeah, so that makes me think, like, say you're, you know, in business, in a partnership with somebody. Early on, it sounds like you have to have very, very emotionally aligned visions that you know, you both feel like the business should go in the same place, and then later as the business grows, then you can make it more data minded. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when we started our business, we didn't actually sit down and talk about these goals, but just through the conversation of like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could make, you know, $3,000 a month, then we could afford to eat out whenever we wanted, and these kinds of these kinds of conversations that we had early on. So our initial goals were to get ourselves out of our previous work and establish something, build some kind of income, build some kind of solid business, really. And then, but the kinds of decisions we're making now are like, okay, let's bring in our shopping cart software, our analytics. Let's look at our active campaign data, and let's see what worked in our last, you know, product launch, and when's the best time of day to send this out so we can hit as many users, and all these kinds of questions, which are 100% data driven. But there's still an element of, especially when you're creating a new product, it's like we don't have the capacity to just test any new products. We want the same level as someone like Google does. There's still an element of, oh, I really feel like there's a gap in the market for this. Maybe we can launch a course which is, you know, serving this type of market and helping them in this way. And then there are ways of obviously testing that, but that initial idea needs to almost come from a creative source.
Yeah, so let's talk about, so you manifested that kind of idea of, okay, the world needs this, we're going to build it. First it was an agency, and now you're doing mostly authority sites. Is that right?
That's correct. So just to be clear, we got into the agency model because it's a fantastic way of quickly building a business. I mean, we had our first client in a week. I think it was maybe 2 months in, and we were at sort of $2,000-3,000 a month in revenue, and that's very, very achievable with any kind of service where you're selling your time, you're providing a service to other companies or individuals. When you're creating an authority site, to get to $2,000-3,000 a month takes months, if not years, of work. So the kind of lag between when you do the work and you get paid is much more significant with that. When we started the agency, as I said, we just wanted to make some money, really. We didn't really have too much of an end goal. And as we got more into it, we realized that agency life wasn't really for us. We're not very good at customer service and dealing with clients, especially stupid clients. I'm sorry. I mean, my attitude and the fact I'm calling them stupid explains why I shouldn't be running an agency. But I mean, we had a situation once where there was a guy who we had demonstrated using A/B testing that a specific layout on his page resulted in more leads to his business. And he said, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't like the look of it. And we're like, well, you realize this makes you more money. We've proven it. It's like, yeah, but I just don't like the look of it. So, you know, you have situations like that. Or this one time we did really, really well for a company. It was a wedding DJ company in the UK. And we basically got them so many bookings for the next 6 months, they were full. So they fired us. And it was like, well, we keep building other people's businesses for them. we're doing a lot of work. We're often encountering a lot of red tape. We can't really be creative. There's struggles, getting websites edited or even getting content uploaded to some sites, all sorts of issues like that. Why don't we just build our own sites? Why don't we just work for ourselves in a way, and then we can not have to deal with any of these problems, but actually like grow an asset, a website that we can make money off of for a long time, potentially sell at some point, do whatever we want, take it in the direction we want. And so that led us to sell our agency at the end of 2014, start 2015. And for about a year prior to that, we'd started developing our own authority sites. And that's what we do till this day.
That's great. Yeah, and it seems like you both do really well at it. You mentioned solving a market need. How do you do that in regards to an authority site? So how do you look at the world and say, yeah, like we need a website in this space?
So usually it's some kind of problem or some kind of passion. So an example of a problem might be someone who has, I don't know, acne, or needs to deliver a best man speech at the wedding. Those kinds of issues where people are like, I have this problem. They go to Google and they look for one of many different kind of search queries that they could put in related to that. You can often build a website around it. There'll often be products around that you can either develop yourself, or an easier way to get started is to be an affiliate, recommend products which other people have and earn commission on that. That's much easier. And there tends to be a little bit more money around those kinds of issues, especially certain problems. I mean, weight loss is the typical example. Everyone in the world, or most people in the world, are looking to lose weight at some point in their lives. I know I've been through that. So any of these kind of real big problems is often quite a lot of potential money in there. The flip side of that is a passion. So that could be like, if I really like woodworking, or I don't know, I love my dog, right? So I could start a dog website. And everyone who has a dog loves their dogs. And even in a recession, they're still spending money on dog food and dog treats. And, I would go hungry before my dog goes hungry. So that is a good market to be in, right? Because there's always going to be money there. People are willing to spend money, and you can make a business out of it. So those are two good areas to start. Honestly, though, you can go with anything. If there's an area that really interests you, and you have a strong passion, especially if you have good experience and can create good content around it. If there are products in that space, then you could probably build a website and make money from it. Of course, it requires a bit of keyword research and mapping out what products are available, how much you can potentially make, what traffic there is before you can really settle on something. But those are the kind of general approaches, I'd say.
And you mentioned picking, that you can pick pretty well anything. How broad is too broad with an authority site?
Good question. So back in the day when we first got started in this, our approach was brand really broadly. So create like a health website, and then let's just like cover everything in there. So home fitness, like, home fitness machines, or supplements, or yoga, or essential oils, all sorts of stuff like this. Nowadays, I wouldn't go with such a broad site. I have experience of much narrower sites doing much better. And I don't mean, like bestleft-handed mouse.net or something like that. But left-handed mice or left-handed products could be a suitable niche. Generally, you want to build one category, one hub at a time. So if you're building a computer equipment website, that would be about as broad as I would go. But even that's maybe a little bit too broad. I'd maybe like focus in on one subset of computer equipment. So that could be, gaming peripherals, or computer equipment for left-handed people is like another way of kind of like cutting that. Or it could be office equipment, which is like another way of cutting that, slicing that. So I would tend to have some kind of bit of a unique angle on it in that sense, but also just broad enough that I'm not going to be too constrained after I've written, 20 articles. I would like to see the potential for probably about 200 to 300 articles and keywords at a minimum before I'm going into that space. That's just a general guideline, though. Obviously, there are situations when those numbers are different, especially for high paying products.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to come back to this, but when you're looking at keywords, so these are all SEO type, or like your main source of traffic is going to be Google. Am I wrong?
Ours is, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there
Yes.
are other sources as well for authority sites. We just had John Dijkstra on the podcast the other week, and he's really, really well on Pinterest.
He's killing it
So
on Pinterest. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, it's a really, really viable strategy these days. But generally, SEO is just the best because it's the highest ROI, return on investment, long term, and you don't have to spend a lot of money like you do with something like ads, which can result in a risk of you spending money and not making money, which is a bad situation if you're a beginner. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to come back to this in a second, but when you're looking at keywords, so what's kind of the sweet spot of, okay, I'm picking X percentage of keywords that I know can be really well monetized, and go ahead, what is really well monetized? What is a really well monetized keyword in an authority site you're building?
Yeah, it's very hard for me to quantify that because it's very niche dependent.
Yeah.
And I guess a better debate to have is what kind of niche can you make a lot of money in? If you answer that question first, then it almost, like CBD, for example. I'm not in that space. So I don't know it super well, but as I understand, it is one of the most competitive niches in the world. There's a lot of money to be made in that space. And if you can even find a keyword that's generating you, a couple dozen visits per month, and if you're making a few sales off of that, because you can make 40, 60, 80, $100 for certain products, it can be worth it, just to have one sale a month coming through. So the raw numbers are only really applicable when you multiply like the potential income you can make from that. If you're monetizing with Amazon, who they recently lowered their commission rates back in April of this year, then you can expect maybe like 3-4% if you're lucky. And if you're working with products that cost $3-4, you really need quite a lot of volume with that before it becomes worthwhile. So you kind of have to think in those terms before you start looking at exactly where you want to go into.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it does depend on, very much on your niche and then very much on your business model. So, Brand Builders is a service-based business. We do sites, we do content, which means like a monetizable keyword for us can be very different than it can be for, like a site that's focused on dog products or whatever.
Yeah, I presume you're at the top level. You're probably selling products for thousands of dollars. And so for you, it's worth it to, even if you get, 1-2 leads a month from a keyword coming in, that's going to be worth it for you. In a year, you'll make a few sales from that. But for an affiliate website that makes $3 from recommending a keyboard or something, that's definitely something it's not worth going into. So,
yeah. Are there, again, not really a fair question, but are there any like blanket, say, search volumes that you look for when sound like an affiliate keyword?
No, because search volume in most keyword tools, it's a little bit inaccurate, right? It's just a guess. So we have situations where there's keywords we're targeting that have estimated traffic of like 10, but we're getting just to our site more than 1,000 visitors a month to the page for that keyword we're targeting. Of course, it's hard to calculate all the long tail, and you can't even see that yourself these days with analytics and that. But yeah, it really depends. Keyword tools, I'm still a huge fan of them. I think they're really good. Anyone that's doing any kind of SEO, you basically need a keyword tool to work. I'm not a fan of the no keyword tool approach whatsoever, just
That's
it's
crazy.
like was it Tony Robbins says they're the map, not the territory. So they're a bit of a guide, but reality can often vary and sometimes vary quite significantly.
Yeah. I think a keyword research tool is essential. I like the ones where you can see the SERPs at a glance. Because my keyword research method is that I like to look at the domain ratings and then the referring domains. And like with KW Finder or Ahrefs who I usually use, you can hit the SERPs, you can see the information, and then like as far as I know, as of today, humans are still the best pattern recognition machines on the planet. It's like it takes a little bit more time, but I really like the kind of manual approach there.
I
And I think
think
search
everyone
volumes
has
are
a,
overrated.
I think they're very useful to have in. Like I would struggle to use a keyword tool without search volume. It's just one source of data that you need to pick up on. It also depends on your as a human internal algorithm for how you decide based on the data you see which keyword you want to target, because how you approach a keyword might be how different to how I approach or how the next person approaches it. So one good example I guess I have is when we're looking at a keyword, we look to see if there are any low to medium in Ahrefs DR, which is domain rating, websites ranking in the top 10 for that keyword. If it's all DR 90 plus high authority sites, New York Times, CNN, these kind of sites, it's probably something we're not going to try and compete with, especially for a newish site. But if there's a DR 36 hobby site ranking number 3, usually we'll be able to create better content, get eventually to a higher domain rating than that, and so probably beat that site. So that's a good indicator that there may be some potential for newer sites to make some headway.
Mm-hmm. And we've already touched on this a bit. So you mentioned that SEO is pretty well your main traffic acquisition source. What's the reason behind focusing so much on SEO versus like going into Pinterest like John Dykstra?
So I think it's like a question on diversification. So John does a really good job on Pinterest. And I think one of his main focuses is doing well on Pinterest. He spent a long time, he's figured it out, he's built a model, he's replicated that successfully across many, many sites. And he's making what, $70-something thousand a month now, which is
ridiculous.
Phenomenal.
Right.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. I am a big proponent of not diversifying too much, because you could go to someone like John and you could say, hey, you're making all this money from Pinterest, but what if they change their algorithm tomorrow? You'll lose all this money. You should actually stop working on more Pinterest sites, stop trying to grow your Pinterest, and instead work on your SEO, diversify, do Facebook ads, get some more traffic from Instagram, figure out YouTube, start a podcast, do all these other things. And there's an argument that may be safer. He may reduce his volatility by taking an approach like that. But the flip side of that is he's not spending all that time milking his golden goose while it's golden. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs make that mistake of not milking the golden goose while it's golden. So that's kind of my approach on that.
Well said. But does that not keep you up a bit at night? Like you're one Google update away from serious loss of income?
Yeah, it does. It does. I have had legit nightmares about algorithm updates and stuff in the past. But if you zoom out of your kind of primal brain for a second, the amount of money that you can lose is also applies upwards as well. So there's a significant amount of money on the table. And if you fail to capitalize on opportunities that exist by doing more of what you're currently doing and growing your existing search traffic higher, or in John's case, it would be Pinterest traffic, then you're leaving a lot of money on the table. You're losing that maybe another $70,000 a month. And the bonus with focus there is that you already figured out the method. You just need to do more of it and apply it to more sites. So there's a strong argument to say that if you just make shitloads of money from this one thing that works really well now, then you don't really have to worry about it all falling apart someday. And honestly, it's quite rare that that there is these catastrophic, amazing site goes to nothing. We have experienced it with at least one of our sites. So we know it can happen, but usually when something like that happens, there are problems with the website, the organization. There's a lot of poor on-page structure, keyword cannibalization, poor content is probably one of the biggest killers, or some kind of issue with the links. So if you're doing a lot of these things right, following as many best practices as reasonably possible, then generally you're not going to encounter so many problems. The issue is, and the issue why a lot of people say, oh, I got spanked in the latest Google update. It's very hard to understand exactly what's going on with their site, because no one's just sharing all their sites online so much, really. So it's hard to really pull apart. Did this person actually have really good content, or did they just think they had, and their internal barometer for what it wasn't particularly good? Very, very hard to say. And honestly, as well, I do feel like there's an element of randomness in Google and the algorithm these days. I've seen some very, very good sites that I highly respect get penalized, but then bounce back, a couple of weeks or a couple of months later when they've done nothing to fix it. So, maybe they're just testing some stuff. I don't know.
Interesting. So this is one thing that keeps me up in regards to content sites in the future, is Google sending less and less clicks to websites and keeping those viewers in the SERPs. So I think one possibility is that 5-10 years from now, as opposed to now it's a featured snippet and then info box and Q&A box and all that, and then 10 blue links. I think it's a reasonable guess that in the future we're pretty much going to have, say, just the SERP and then 3 pretty detailed responses from most queries that are from 3 different websites or something like that. Would you say that that's reasonable?
So I'm not quite sure what you mean. So you say there'd just be 3 results, like FAQ question boxes? Is that what you mean, or
something like a featured snippet but much more expansive? So yeah. So say someone's searching. I'm just making this up. Something like I don't know how to clip a cat's claws or whatever. And well, dang, actually that's not a good one, because I would be willing to bet that already has a YouTube video in the SERP. Where they just click and it goes to the space in the video. But something where you have to read an answer, and it's just like a featured snippet but longer. So as opposed to 3 sentences, now it's 3 paragraphs, and it's a pretty detailed explanation of your question. Like, my fear is that Google's going to implement something like that.
This is a common thing. Like I could sit here and give you a guess, but we're both just guessing here. We're extrapolating like the direction it's going, and we're saying, oh, wonder what if it keeps going exactly the same rate of change, then maybe in 10 years there won't be any websites on Google, and Google will just be a website that has all the world's information on it, and maybe that will be the case. But I think that's probably unlikely, because I think people want a bit more diversity in their information. And if Google is just taking all my content from my website, serving it to me, and not doing any favors for me, then why am I going to allow it to do that? Already with featured snippets, you kind of need to opt in by having code that allows Google to take it, or I think there's a way to opt out of it even as well. But obviously, if you do that, you don't stand a chance of getting a featured snippet and getting some traffic from it. So Google has to give a little bit as well as take, and they do try and take a lot, don't get me wrong. And that is, broadly speaking, the direction they've been going more and more. There are a lot of hurdles before it will get to that place, not least website owners trying to stop letting them take their content. But all this antitrust legislation that's going on in the US at the moment. They just had a couple months ago, it was the House, I forget which committee, which subcommittee, but they had like the CEOs of like Amazon, Google, Facebook, and I forget who else. It was one of the other big guys was on there, and they grilled them for like the whole thing was about 6 hours long, and we actually watched it all just so we could talk about it on a podcast. And it was really interesting, the dynamic going on there, because in the past 2-3 years ago, there's another of these hearings, and they were talking to Mark Zuckerberg, and you've probably seen the YouTube video where all these idiot senators or House congressional members were asking questions like, how does Facebook make money, and all sorts of questions.
Terrible.
They just didn't understand it. Well, that's changed. So they actually came quite well armed with a lot of very specific cases and very specific queries. And there was a lot more of these big CEOs going like, oh, I'll have to have my office follow up on that individual case with you, because they didn't have an answer for it. And there was a lot of obviously kind of dodgy stuff going on. And I will say that the ideas they were critiquing are maybe from the last 2 to 4 years. So the antitrust hearings haven't even gotten near featured snippets yet. So in another 2-3 years, that's going to become more of an issue, I believe. So there's only so big these tech companies can go before either they get split up or they have to abide by different rules. Or maybe in an ideal world, Apple launches a search engine, or Ahrefs have promised to launch a search engine. Maybe there's some more competition comes into the market, because that's probably a better approach. We've seen with something like TikTok. So when you sign up to TikTok, the first few videos you post, you get like 50,000 views to them, because they just incentivize you and make you want it. They send you all this traffic to new users. So you start posting more and more and more. Then that gets you into the ecosystem. If Apple comes along and is like, hey, well, we're launching a search engine, here's how to optimize, here's all our Apple Search Console or whatever, people start optimizing for that. And then they get loads of traffic because no one else is doing it. And then suddenly everyone starts optimizing their sites for that, and then becomes a thing, and they can push it out to their ecosystem, because everyone who has an iPhone or a Mac will get it by default. There's many ways this could go. I can theorize all day long, and it's really interesting talking about this, but I just don't know enough about predicting the future to really say for sure it's going that way. You will, if you read a lot of the SEO Facebook groups, whenever something like this and a new featured snippet tech comes out, you'll hear a lot of negativity, and people say, this is the end, SEO is dead, Google is taking over. But when I got into this 11, 12 years ago, people were saying the same thing. It's just a sort of mentality problem.
So what is what's in the future plans for the Authority Hacker portfolio, and what are you doing to prepare yourself for the future? Because it sounds like you've got some at least some ideas of what could be true in 5 years. What are you doing to prepare yourself?
Good question. So where we are with Authority Hackers, our main business is we sell training, digital marketing training. We have various courses, and we have a whole marketing engine to support that on the Authority Hacker brand.
And allow me to interrupt. It's all amazing, right? Like, I'm not an affiliate. I'm not going to be, because I don't want people to think that's like tainting my recommendation. But Authority Hackers is where I go when I need to learn something. So I mean, it's the best money I've ever spent online.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I mean that.
So that is kind of our main business, right? We also run a portfolio of other sites in other niches. Sometimes we'll sell those. We'll start a new one. Maybe we'll start a new case study. We may have one going on at the moment. There are various points when we decide to make certain moves in that area. But one of the issues is that those two businesses are almost like counter opposite. There's different incentives with each one. What I mean by that is, let's say we're working on a small niche site and we come up with a really cool link building tactic. Do we use that tactic and make money from it on this site and all our other sites? Or do we make a course about how to do that and then make money from teaching that, but maybe that tactic then gets shared with loads of people and it becomes slightly less effective? That is a difficult issue or a difficult challenge that we have to face when balancing what we do. So our approach has very much been to let's put Authority Hacker first. Let's prioritize helping other people, teaching other people, and let's use all these other sites to keep our edge So to stay fresh. I think there's a lot of internet marketers out there who maybe had some initial experience building websites or running agencies or whatever initially, moved over to teaching people how to do it. And then for years or decades, have just been teaching people, but all they know now is the IM niche and how to teach people how to do it, and not really how to actually do it themselves anymore. And at the times when we've been focusing too much on Authority Hacker, I've definitely felt us like lose a little bit of edge in that sense. So what we're trying to do is make sure there's a nice balance there between working on new sites so we can learn, so we can develop new things, develop new tactics, get good case studies, hopefully, keep our edge, and then use that to make Authority Hacker training as good as possible. And that's really what we're trying to do, just make it as good as possible. We're very, very self-critical. I look back at some of the content in the course we've made like 2 years ago, and I'm like, oh, it's terrible. We need to do better next time. We need to improve that. But then someone comes along and sees it for the first time, like, oh, that's really good. I think it's difficult to keep that balance, but as much as possible, we're trying to do that so that we don't end up becoming one of these marketers that only talks about marketing. So that's what we're trying to avoid. In terms of what we're trying to move forward with or move towards for our plans for the future, it's just to make that whole process as good as possible. We spent a lot of time over the last year and a half working under the hood. We used to have a 2-day average response time on support. Now it's like 2 hours. We've implemented a lot of stuff under the hood where when people get to a certain point in our course, they choose a niche for their website that they want to start. When they tick off that lesson, it'll notify our support team and we'll reach out to them manually and say, hey, a lot of people struggle at this point because we did a survey on this. Can we help you? Do you need us to check what you've done? Do you want to bounce some ideas around? And so we've done a lot of these things, and I feel like that's given us a bit of an edge over some of our competitors in terms of giving a good experience throughout our course. My goal really is, I could say on the one hand, I want to get into doing investing and all this kind of high level stuff, but actually I just really want to create the best content I can. So if I can be doing that in 5 years and 10 years, that's that would be a success in my view.
In regards to creating content, how do you decide what is free content and paid content?
That's a tough one as well. Generally, anything really, really good, which requires a lot of explaining. If there's a lot of steps to it, maybe you need something that I can't just explain to you on a podcast in 5 minutes with my voice. Right. That would probably go in our courses. There's an argument to say that you should put your best content in your info products in your courses, so people who pay get the best stuff. And I think we do that, but you also need to balance that by giving a bit of a flavor of the things you can do in your free content, in your email newsletter, especially on our YouTube and our podcast and on our blog as well. So it's kind of like we show people what's possible on those free platforms, and then we show them exactly how to do it step by step, talking about all the nuance and all the detail and anything that could possibly go wrong in the video training course. So that's kind of how we do it.
Well said. And cool. So kind of starting to wrap up some rapid fire questions for you. So sure. What's one tool that you cannot live without?
Ahrefs.
Okay. Good answer. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's the best source of data for making decisions about your website regarding SEO, links, for doing so, link building, prospecting, all those kinds of things. I'm not an affiliate. They don't have an affiliate program anymore. SEMrush would pay us 40% if we promoted their stuff, but honestly, I think Ahrefs is just a little bit better, so we still promote them.
Yeah, agreed. And then what's the resource other than your, some of your own that you recommend most other people? So like a book or a podcast or a website or something like that.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit controversial here and say I actually quite like Neil Patel's podcast. So Neil Patel Neil Patel has a bit of a love-hate relationship, you could say, with the SEO industry. He's, I'd say, the biggest SEO blogger, online marketing blogger out there by quite some way. Very, very successful guy, but has a bit of a interesting reputation, as maybe like more on the beginner end of the spectrum, like newbie kind of content. A lot of the seasoned bitter veterans of the SEO world just despise him for many reasons. And he has his faults for sure, but his podcast, it's very, very short. It's like 7-minute videos on average, or not videos, 7-minute episodes on average. Very, very good content, very actionable, very useful, and I've gotten a lot of cool ideas from it. So I'm a big fan of that. I'd also say Brian Dean's blog, if you're into reading long blog posts, it's probably the best example of how to write epic content on any topic you can imagine. And if you need to know something about SEO, he's probably got an article explaining what it is or how to do it. So that's usually a good start.
Yeah, I can say I pretty well opened every email that Brian Dean sends me.
Yeah, he just sent me one before I came on this, so I'm going to read his when I finish this interview.
That's it. Me too. I literally thought I'm gonna read this right after I talked to Mark. So crazy is that. What do you think is your most successful strategy that you've done this year that someone can repeat?
What kind of strategy do you mean?
So anything
business strategy, SEO strategy, or
anything that you look at in your business and say, man, that has been a home run. I can give you so for brand builders, for us, it's for sure been these interviews, this podcast, because our problem was, how do we get connected with people who are in the industry, who have an audience, and provide them value first? It's, okay, we use our email list of 5 figures and growing YouTube subscribers. We provide a promo for them as long as they hook up with us. So that's by far been our most successful strategy.
Okay. So for us, we have a podcast and we have 230 episodes now. We've been going for about 5 years. And up until February this year, it was all audio. What we did is we made the leap into video. So all our podcasts are recorded in 4K resolution. We've got all the Joe Rogan microphone, all the proper lighting in place. Even got some like sound isolation things on my wall now. So we film all our podcasts, and we still make an audio version as well. So all the people who listen to them in the car or who are subscribed on SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever, they're still getting the content. But we're now posting on YouTube as well. And that's been really big for us because podcasting is mostly an engagement mechanism. So you don't really, at least in the BTB space, you don't really acquire that many people. Not many people find the Authority Hacker podcast unless it's through word of mouth. They tend to find our blog, find our website, find us through an ad or some other way, then discover our podcast, and they use that to learn more about us. And hopefully some of them will buy our products after they listen to that. YouTube, on the other hand, it does that. And you could argue that it does that even better because they can see you and people can really feel like they're connecting with you further. But it also acts as a discovery platform. YouTube's the second biggest search engine in the world after Google, no surprise. So people are finding us either through searching specific keywords, which we have podcasts about, or being recommended us, after they finish a video in the recommended section, or even on their homepage if they're watching videos which are related to us or into internet marketing. So we're getting sometimes 5,000 people an episode discover us new for the first time on our YouTube channel, and that's been crazy for like just discovery. We haven't had such a sustained growth in new followers since really we started. So that's been a big win for us.
Are you making the switch to video in any of your portfolio sites?
That's very difficult because Gael and I don't actually create most of the content for those sites, whereas we do for Authority Hacker. So we've thought about it, and there are certainly spaces when it makes a lot of sense to take like a video first approach. We need to find the right partners to work with on those projects. The sites which we have at the moment, at least, are primarily blog, review, SEO, article based. So the answer is no, not at the moment, but it's something we will have to do in the next few years on most of those sites, I believe.
Gotcha. And then do you have any like travel friendly video podcast setup? I'm still working on mine. It's the reason I ask.
Oh no. So I did the digital nomad thing like 10 years ago, and honestly I can't get any work done when I'm on the road. So I find that really, really difficult. I think the audio is the biggest problem normally, because you're always in Airbnbs with echoes and, planes flying over, and it's just a little bit difficult. It's good to have a very high quality video, like external camera of some kind. If you're into taking like travel photos and stuff, and you're bringing your DSLR around, like get an Elgato Cam Link. You can connect your camera to your computer and record through your DSLR. If you can get a really good microphone, probably the best USB one, or a really good USB one, is the Rode Podcaster. Very, very good for very good USB microphone. Doesn't pick up very much background noise like the Blue Yeti is really bad for that, I believe.
Yeah, it is. That's what I use when I'm at home. So Blue Yeti.
How did you find out about that?
The Blue Yeti or what?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know. When I got my start into internet marketing, I created my own course. So I was 18 and I created a financial subscription course. So you could subscribe and I'd like give you finance tips, which for someone who had just graduated high school was perhaps not the best business model. And I had heard that if you like recorded videos and like sent people down this funnel, then that was like some crazy high converting. I was a wantrepreneur, right? Just chasing dollars. So
hey, we all start somewhere.
We all start somewhere. And that was where I started. I had one friend sign up. It was horrible. I canceled after the first month, as they should have. But anyways, I was recording this like video to put on a landing page, and I heard that the Blue Yeti mic was great, so that was what I ended up getting, and I've just kept it for years now.
So when we started our podcast as well, we Googled like best microphone for podcasting, and there are all these YouTube videos and reviews saying, "Oh, get the Blue Yeti mic. It's really good. It's really good. It's really good." It's terrible. It's like the worst microphone. It really is the opposite of good. It's the worst microphone you can get for doing a podcast, because it's unless you have multiple people in the same room. It's built for like picking up all the sound in a room. So every tap, every scratch, your computer fan noise, it picks it all up, and you have so much background noise. The Rode Podcaster, it's like I don't know what they call it, but it's like directional, so it only picks up audio from like where it's pointing at. So it's much better. So that's what I would do, but I'm not the best person to ask about travel setups, to be honest.
Okay, maybe I should talk to Gael then. That's good to know. So I've got like a little, I think it's like a $30 mic I got off of Amazon, and it's not great. Like it's definitely not great. For sure, super travel friendly. Like it's just a USB mic, but it's a lot better than like a computer mic.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know what I'd do if I had to like do the minimalist nomad approach. I'm sure there's some good kit out there, but audio is the most important thing, really. Video, you can get away with like your laptop's webcam or whatever.
Yep. Hello, that's me from here. The audio thing is difficult. So with me, I just travel with a backpack. Like I've got 3 shirts and 3 pairs of pants in Brazil right now, and my laptop and all my video equipment. But that's it, so, and it is my fear is like, I'll get a good mic and then I'll ruin it while I'm going through TSA and something gets bumped around. And it's like,
It's actually quite a big problem with microphones traveling through airports, because apparently they look like some kind of club or baton. Honestly, about 50% of the time I've been through airports, at least in the UK, with a big microphone in my carry-on, I get stopped and they open it up and they ask what kind of singer I am or something and all this stuff. So, yeah.
Nope, can't sing. I just record videos for the internet.
Yeah.
For me, I have it's like a cord carrier. It's, I don't know, probably 8 inches, like 20 centimeters long, something like that. And it's pretty thick. It's got all my cords in it, because I carry quite a bit of electronics. and they always want to see that. Like, what, like, looks like I guess it looks like a bomb or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Got all these
probably.
flyers going everywhere. Like, that's freaky, man. Back on track. So what's one way you've cut expenses in your business this year?
Cut SaaS subscriptions. So
Yeah.
if you've been running a business, an online business for any length of time, you probably have a bunch of SaaS subscriptions, even if they're like 5, 10, 15, 20 bucks a month. Don't think of it in terms of how much it costs you a month, because that's how they get you. Think of everything in terms of what is the annual cost of this. So if you want to hire someone, how much are you paying per year? If you want to subscribe to a $200 a month subscription, that's actually $2,400 per year, which sounds like more real when you put it into those kind of terms. So just comb through your Xero or whatever you're using for your bookkeeping, or even just individual credit card bills, PayPal especially, and just cut all those recurring subscriptions. Watch out for the annual PayPal recurring subscriptions. Those are the worst ones, because you always forget to cancel them. So whenever I subscribe to something, which is on an annual payment, I will always set myself a reminder for like 355 days after I subscribe to it. So do I need to unsubscribe? If yes, then I'll go and do it. So that's been a big one for us as well. And also cutting G Suite accounts. We had a G Suite account for like our HR, where we didn't even have an HR person, and just the way we organized it was like really silly. So we cut a bunch of those, and it was like they're $8 a month each, or what's that, like almost $100 a year. So lots of potential savings from doing that kind of exercise fairly regularly.
Yeah, I got hit with this one just yesterday. Had a SaaS product renew for a glorious $4,000. Like, I didn't even know we were subscribed to that. Like, oh gosh.
Most of the time you can actually get your money back if you sort of contest it and say, hey, I'm not actually using this. Can you refund me? But yeah, you do have to be a little bit careful about those things.
Yeah, the thing that's been most helpful for me in business negotiations, even in regards to like getting refunds for SaaS products, is a book called Never Split the Difference. Have you heard of it?
I have, yeah. I haven't read it though. What's the sort of principle of it?
Okay, so FBI's former international lead hostage negotiator writes a book on how to negotiate. And his whole premise is that compromise is a bad idea in most cases. Like, he says, say a guy's trying to choose shoes, and black or brown, and he goes to his wife and he says, hey, which shoe do you think? And she says brown. Well, he likes the black one, so he wears one of each. He wears one black and one brown. That's a compromise. So he says, in business and in life, compromises can often lead us to places where no one is happy, and things are actually worse off. So it's just his tips on like negotiations and how to make your point known and reasonable. Best $15 ever spent.
Just to be a little bit controversial, I might disagree with a little bit of that logic. I understand where you're coming from. If you're trying to like save someone's life in a hostage negotiation, it's like life or death. It's quite a binary thing. Generally in business negotiations, it's a little bit more three-dimensional than that. One of the best books I ever read on negotiating is called 3D Negotiation by John Sabirnius. He's a lecturer of negotiation at Harvard, and it's a phenomenal book. My dad had actually worked in negotiating like really, really large IT contracts in the oil industry. And before he did it, they sent him on a course taught by this guy. So he's like the business negotiator guru, I guess. And what it teaches is if it's like which type of shoes should I get, black or brown, it's like you first need to expand the scope of the negotiation and figure out what everybody wants. So does your wife actually want you to look good, or does she want something that matches her clothes? Is that more important to her? Or does she not care? Does she just want to give you something so you'll be happy and you'll be happy with how you look, but she really wants to also buy this red dress, and maybe she can sneak that in if you go to the place that has the brown store. And there's all these weird dynamics start to creep in, especially in larger negotiations. So yeah, a very interesting book. It might give a bit of a counterpoint to the binary choice, but I have heard Never Split the Difference is a good book, and it's on my Audible wish list. So I shall check it out shortly.
Yeah, and the guy who reads it on Audible does such a good job. 100% agreed about 3D negotiations, though. And the example's an extreme one, like, oh yeah, no one's gonna wear one of each color shoe. But yeah, and in fact, this just happened to me recently. So I was chatting with someone about a promotion for one of our businesses, and that person decided to promote a competitor, which is fine, like has every right to do that. But it came at the cost of some relationship goodwill, because we'd built up goodwill for quite a while. And I think it was one of those situations where the person who made the decision looked at it as a very binary choice, like promote X or Y, when really each came with 3D consequences. I have to consider both goodwill on both sides. So yeah, I just wrote that down when you were chatting about it. That's on my reading list now. Oh, thank you.
Nice. It's probably the driest book. Honestly, it reads like a university textbook. You need a couple of sessions to get through it, really. But it's very, very powerful for any kind of like business negotiation. Probably not so good for a hostage negotiation, but there are some principles in there as well, I guess you could use.
Sweet. And Mark, any closing thoughts for our readers and watchers, or listeners and watchers?
No, not really. Just if you want to hear more of my idiotic ramblings, then we have a podcast as well. As I mentioned, we have 230 something episodes. If you go to authorityhacker.com/podcast, you can hear more of me and my business partner, Gael, talk about how we build our sites, how we grow our sites. Sometimes interview interesting guests like this John Dijkstra guy we had on last week. He's making $70-something thousand a month from Pinterest. So we dig into like how he does that, and like how he got there, and how you can hopefully replicate some of those strategies as well. It's all free. So if you're interested in checking that stuff out, then go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll be on there next week. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, and you have a great webinar as well for someone who is looking to kind of get into the business.
Sure. Yeah. So if you go to authorityhackertraining, all one word, .com, that will redirect you to our webinar. As any course business, we have a sales webinar, which has about an hour of like loads and loads of value. And then we pitch a product at the end of it. So you don't have to watch that pitch at the end if you don't want. You can just watch the first hour and get a ton of value about 5 big steps that you can take to start your own authority site, how we build our sites, the systems and processes, the templates even in there that we give away that we use for creating content, building links, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a free resource. You can check that out if you want as well.
Yeah, and it really is good. So I watched a webinar that I won't say a name, but kind of a sort of a scammier guy online. Not related to Authority Hacker at all, but just yesterday, just because I was curious, right? So I found this guy on YouTube, and I was like, oh yeah, of course he's going to sell something. So ends up having a webinar, and it's 2 hours of just zero value, just hype talk. And
so this is really one of the reasons why we built Authority Hacker the way we did, because I feel like I would have gotten into internet marketing 10 years before I actually did, were it not for the fact that everyone's sales page had like, here's my Ferrari that I drive, here's me swimming in a bath full of cash, and just the most ridiculous salesy, hypey things. And it seemed like, oh, this is a too good to be true kind of thing. So when we built our business, it was like, let's just teach the value, but like not do any of that super salesy stuff. And it may cost us some conversions because maybe that's a better way to demonstrate the potential values. I don't know, but it's not really how we want to create content. So our philosophy is a bit more real, I guess.
Yeah, and that webinar of yours is awesome. So authorityhackertraining.com.
Yep, that's the one.
Awesome. Mark, thanks so much for hopping on with us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
All right, see ya.